Hey everyone, welcome back to Season 2 of Leap Canada's podcast, Post Secondary Tea. My name's Noah, and I'm the PR manager here at Leap, as well as the host for this season. For those of you who are just joining us, Leap stands for Learn, Empower, Assist, Prepare, and we're focused on bridging the gap between post-secondary and secondary education. On this episode, we'll be diving into the ever-important topic of residence life and finding your community. Moving to university can be a scary experience, and on this podcast you'll learn some tips about what to bring to residence, tips on making friends in a new environment, and how to know if you're taking on too much in terms of clubs and extracurriculars. Cool. So on today's episode, we are joined by Samir from UBC. Do you want to just give yourself a quick introduction?
For sure. Thanks so much, Noah. So my name is Samir Ismail. I am going into my third year studying international relations at UBC, the University of British Columbia. I'm also part of a Bachelor of Arts and Master of Management dual degree, so I get to study arts and business at UBC. Couple of things I'm involved in. I've been really focused on Model United Nations at UBC. I've been involved in our Tedx organization there as well, a financial literacy organization called Penny Drops. And right now I'm part of our co-op program. So that essentially allows me to do a bit of work experience during my degree. And right now I'm on a placement at the US consulate in Vancouver. So that's a little bit about me. I love all things related to international relations and politics. So that's what I'm passionate about.
Awesome. Thanks for the overview. That was a really cool introduction. So just kind of getting into the topic for today, I guess. First question is, did you live on residence first year?
I did, yes. So I lived in one of UBC's 3 first-year residence areas. Definitely was a good move, I think, looking back on it. I met a lot of my friends that I eventually stayed connected with throughout my university experience from being able to meet them within the first week of moving into residence. So yeah, I did, and definitely enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's cool. Was it like a single room residence or a double room? What kind is that?
Yeah, so there's so many different types at UBC specifically. One of them in particular is the connected single, which is what I had. So it's essentially where you have 2 single rooms and they're connected by a shared washroom. So essentially I was just sharing a washroom with one person, but I had my own room. So it was, I think, a good fit for me personally, because I was someone who sort of really valued having my own personal space. And I think the majority of rooms at UBC are single rooms. And I think that goes for a lot of different universities in Canada, at least. And then sort of sharing the washroom with one other person was nice because you get to have a little bit more personal space in that way as well.
Yeah, for sure. I guess some people can do like the whole floor washroom, but I definitely can't imagine myself on that one.
Yeah, no, totally.
Yeah, for sure. I guess a big question for incoming first year students have is do you have any tips in terms of dorm essentials, like things you need or things you just shouldn't bring for first year?
Yeah, I feel like for me personally, I brought more than I needed. I think I'm someone who thought I needed to over prepare and just thought of anything and everything I would just need to live on campus. And I think one thing that I learned pretty quickly is that most university campuses have a lot of resources available just there, in the different grocery stores that exist on campus. So I was able to access a lot of the different things that I needed that way. So I brought more than what I think I actually needed. One thing that I think does really help, though, depending on whether your residence area allows it, is a mini fridge, because something that I learned pretty quickly is that you're not going to be able to eat all of the food that you have access to sometimes through the dining halls, and even just when you go out to grab food in different areas on campus or even to restaurants in the city. Just having that fridge is definitely a big essential, and I didn't have that in my first year residence, but one of my friends did, so I kept all my food in their fridge. So that was definitely one big essential for me. But I think having small sets of utensils, dishes, little things like that can just make life a lot easier. Also, in Vancouver, I really needed a fan because there's no AC in a lot of residences, at least in Canada. And that's because they focus on the heating, right? Because it'll get cold in the winter. So a fan for September and April is probably a good move too. Yeah.
Those are some good tips. And I guess in terms of food and stuff, how did you find like the dining hall experience and the meal plans on campus?
Yeah, I mean, UBC's meal plan specifically was nice because what we got to do was not only go and eat at the dining halls, but we also have access to a variety of different dining options around campus. So different food outlets, such as just like a pizza place or like a small taco shop. There was like Blue Chip Cookies, which is like our iconic campus bakery, things like that. You can use it at different coffee shops as well. So that was definitely really helpful because I could sort of use the meal plan whichever way I wanted, and have access to a lot of different dining options, not necessarily just a residence dining hall. And even though I lived in one residence, I was able to also use it at different dining halls so I could check the menu. That's one pro tip. Nobody, like people don't know this at UBC, is that they post the menus online for each residence area. So you can actually check and see what's being served on that particular day and then go and get what you want.
Yeah.
But I think at a certain point it can, get a little boring. So it's nice to have access to a variety of different food outlets, and not every university does that. So I think it's just good to maybe budget that in advance, just to think about the fact that you're probably not going to use your meal plan the entire time, and you're going to want a little bit of variety at least maybe once or twice a week.
Yeah, for sure. And how did you find like staying healthy like on the meal plan? I know people say like freshman 15 and stuff. Is it hard
Yeah.
to stay healthy and stuff on residence?
It's not impossible. It's something that's very doable. I think the challenge is that a lot of what you're doing when you're at university is like sitting in one place and studying. So I think if you find like different opportunities to stay active, that's one important thing. But in terms of like healthy meal options, there definitely are quite a few. They tend to be a little bit more on the expensive side. So that's one thing to factor in, is that you will be paying more likely if you want a healthier food option, which sucks. So that's not the way the world should work, but that's definitely one thing that I found. And I think it's important to factor that in advance.
Okay. No, that's good to know. And then in terms of like making friends and stuff on residence, because I know like you said you're in a single room and stuff, was it still easy to make friends with people, say on your floor and stuff?
Yeah, I think one thing that definitely helped is usually like your residence advisors, or like some of the different staff in your residence area will set up like events for you in some of the first weeks or two of moving into your residence area. And those are really good to go and attend. And I know there were people who lived in my residence area who just didn't go to those events right at the beginning. And then it was really hard to get to know them. So like if you pass by them in the halls, you don't know who they are, right? You don't know if they actually live in the building. So I think that's something really important, just to know like who's living around you. And that can be like a great foundation for like starting quite a few different friendships on campus. Like I personally like did not have like a really amazing friendship with my roommate or anything, or the person I was sharing a washroom with, so like a bathroom mate in that case. But that really didn't affect my experience at all, because I knew people who lived around me. And then some of the orientation events as well, when you're coming onto campus, like at UBC we have something called Jumpstart. At different universities it probably has different names, but whatever your orientation program is also super helpful. And I think that was actually more impactful for me personally than just like my residence community alone.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know and stuff. I can't remember, maybe I'm totally wrong here, but were you an RA at all in your second year, or?
I was, yeah. So I was an RA for one term in second year.
Yeah.
I worked in a different residence area than where I lived in my first year, but similar room types in the area. So connected singles was in the area for all of the residents that I advised for.
Yeah.
But I got my own room. You get your own room as an RA, which is nice. Yeah.
And how was your experience as an RA? Because I guess it was during COVID and stuff too.
Yeah, it was very different than I thought it would be. So obviously when I was applying to be an RA, I did not factor in COVID-19 at all. And my classes were all online. So I was just, taking Zoom lectures from my room. And I think, to a certain extent, it was an enjoyable experience because, I got to meet the other residence advisors and have a really good community with them. and mentor a lot of students who had really unique interests that sort of required them to be on campus. So it wasn't your typical group. But I think being a residence advisor in general is a sort of an experience that really like teaches you a lot about mentorship,
Yeah.
and how you can sort of like coach the people around you and give them support based on your own experience. And I think just some of those tips that you can provide to first years who are coming in, who are just unfamiliar with the campus and sort of university life and how they can meet different people, is really something that I valued and I was happy to do. So I enjoyed being an RA. I think COVID-19 made it challenging for sure because it limited the amount of like physical connection that you can have by just going and meeting people. And it was sort of restricted more to the virtual environment, which people wanted to engage with less, understandably. But I still think it was a worthwhile experience for me, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. That sounds like a good experience and a good learning opportunity. I guess like in terms of like main things they say I guess you do in residence, like how did you find studying like in your room? Did you prefer that or more libraries and stuff?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it really depends on what you're doing specifically.
Yeah.
Like studying can mean a lot of different things. Like if you're cramming for an exam, or if you are sort of in a position where you have an assignment due and you're being pressed by deadlines, I think it's good to be in a place where you have very limited distractions. So for me, that was my room. Like that's where I could just go and work without any distractions and no one would bother me. Whereas in the library, even though it's quiet most of the time, it's still a public space and there's still things going on all around. So I preferred that when I was sort of just reviewing notes or had to do some readings for the next day or something like that, because it was much more of a relaxed environment. And then I'd go with a group of people. And then depending on your university, there's different types of libraries too, right? Like there's some that are more for collaborative studying. So if you have like group work you want to do, then you can go to certain libraries. And some are just very like quiet, put your head down and get work done. So it really depends on the space. And I think getting a sense of what all the different spaces are like is really important. So one thing I did in September is I sort of tried out a different study space each week and just to see what I liked best. And I think that's something really important, just to get a sense of what you will prefer throughout the rest of the year.
Okay, yeah, that's some good insight. And I guess for anyone listening from UBC, what's probably your favorite library on campus?
Yeah, so my favorite library, there's two of them. One of them is Irving K. Barber. So that's our learning center. That's the one where you're allowed to like talk and have conversations in the library. And that I thought was a really good space because I could go with my friends and, actually talk to them, even though we're like doing readings and other tasks like throughout the day. And then the other space that I really liked is Woodward Library, because not a lot of people know about it. And it's more used by graduate students, but it makes it really quiet. So if I was trying to do something where I need to be a little bit more focused, that was a good one.
Yeah, those are some good tips. And I like how there's like different libraries for different needs and stuff. So I'm
Totally,
sure
yeah.
think about that. And then kind of moving to like the opposite from your residence, how did you find like socializing, more partying and stuff? Was that a big thing in your residence or?
Yeah, I mean, there's sort of different restrictions based on like which university you go to. Like at UBC, like there are certain like residence rules that you have to like abide by in terms of like what parties are allowed versus not allowed. So I think it's definitely an interesting balance. Like I think people sort of overestimate the amount that residence plays specifically in sort of the party culture at universities.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time it isn't always the fact that things take place within residence areas. That said, I think there is lots of like different points in time where I was like meeting different groups of people within residence and gathering with them and spending time with them. So I think it sort of really depends on your own personal experience and what you prefer to do. If you're someone who is really interested in meeting a lot of people all the time, then I think you'll find that you can not only be in residence, but you'll find other communities in order to sort of engage with that party culture at university. But for me personally, like I'm like naturally an introvert. Like I was not someone who was always out there just engaging with the party culture at UBC. So I think residence was still a good home for me, even in that way, right? Because even though I wasn't someone who was going out and going to parties all the time, like I still felt like I had a home in residence. And I think a lot of people found that that was a good balance too. It's sort of it's whatever you make it out to be.
Yeah.
Which is not exactly a clear answer, but I think that's the true one. Yeah.
No, yeah, that's fair and all. And this is just a personal question I've had, but like, how easy is it to say have like friends over in your residence? Because I've heard like mixed things about how strict like residences are about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think as long as you abide by like whatever rules like your residence advisor tells you right at the beginning, then you should be just fine. Like I was able to bring friends over to my room like all the time, and it was no problem. I think one important thing, like just communicate like with your roommate, right, and like your or whoever you're sharing like a bathroom, whatever with.
Yeah.
Just because like it's everyone's like shared space and stuff like that. But I think as long as you have that covered and um, you sort of understand the rules set by your RA and sort of how they want to lead the community and how they want it to feel, then I think you can make a good judgment call on that. But for me personally, I was able to have people over to study, and even like before we would like go out like on a Friday night to go to a restaurant or something like that, and people would come over to my place beforehand. Like that was totally fine
Okay.
for me. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. That's good to know. And kind of moving on to a different topic of more of like clubs and stuff. Can you talk a
Mhm.
little bit more about like your experience joining clubs in first year and like what kind of clubs you joined and stuff?
For sure. Yeah. So I think one really important thing to mention right off the bat is that not all organizations you can sort of join at a university are official clubs. So about half of the organizations I joined were officially clubs as designated by like the student association at UBC, and half were not. So I joined Penny Drops and Tedx Ubc, which were two organizations that are not official clubs at the university. So Tedx Ubc I thought was really interesting because I'm someone who likes public speaking. I had done a lot of like debate and model UN in high school, so I thought, you know what, why not try it out? And I was able to be on the organizing committee for Tedx Ubc in my first year, which was really exciting. And then I also joined Penny Drops as a mentor, so that was something where I was trying to engage in financial literacy, which was a new topic for me. So I think that brings up another important point, which is feel free to try out clubs where you don't necessarily know if you're going to have an interest. And that's one thing I tell people all the time, because I never thought I would ever have an interest in financial literacy. Like I was someone who was very into politics, international relations. I didn't think that, I would have a passion in another area, but I definitely did once I started. So I think definitely try things out. And your university typically will have like clubs days or some type of way to engage with clubs. And that's what I used in order to join quite a few of them. So I also joined the Model UN Student Association. And I think also the club specifically for my major. So like our International Relations Student Association. But there's a variety of them out there. And I think trying, not only your passions, but other things that you think you might not be interested in at first, but, just want to put yourself out there and try it out. Also a good move to make.
Okay, yeah, that's some good insight. And in terms of like club stay, does that normally just happen, say, like a student center or something, just booths, or how does that work?
Yeah, it was in our AMS Nest, which is like our student center at UBC, exactly. So that's where it took place, and I think it usually takes place over 2 days. So usually it's heavily publicized, especially within residence areas. And that's one good thing about living in first year residence, is that you'll get flyers up on the wall all the time that'll tell you about what's going on. So Clubs Days was one of those. But I'm pretty sure if you follow your student association just on social media before you end up on campus, that's always something good too, because then you'll be able to sort of get notified if something like that is coming up.
Okay, yeah, that's good to know. And I guess in terms of like you, how did you kind of decide what clubs you want? Because I feel like it's kind of overwhelming sometimes, like the amount of
Yeah,
options there in university.
definitely. I think there were moments where I went to Clubs Day and then walked up to a table, like had a conversation with people who ran a particular club, And then after that conversation, I was like either very interested or not interested at all. So I think what really helped me was those conversations and just talking to people about it.
Okay.
And I think you don't necessarily have to join things your friends are in. I think that's another important lesson that I learned through
Yeah.
the process, is that a lot of people think that you like are under pressure to be like, oh, I need to go and join clubs with people. I don't want to go into a club and be alone.
Yeah.
And with a lot of clubs, people come in just on their own because they think it might be interesting, and then you just build friendships that way with other people who have come in the exact same way as you. So I sort of chose my clubs again based one on my particular passions and interests related to my degree,
Yeah.
and then two based on sort of cool things that I had heard about them from other people. So I think what's always helpful to do is do a little bit of research, like before you end up on campus, and just think about what clubs you might be interested based on just learning about what's out there. Um, but at the same time, like, you don't have to necessarily sacrifice like sort of your main focus areas. I think it's always good to like take a club where you're sort of relating it to your degree itself, because that can always be helpful in like job applications down the road. So then you can show like, hey, I was involved with this club and my degree also relates to the same area. So if you're applying for a job in that field, it looks really good. But at the same time, like, clubs at the end of the day are for your own personal enjoyment, right? It's not always about like professional development and things like that. So make sure that, once you go and join a club for the first time, if you're not like enjoying it by being there, then yeah, it might probably is not the space for you. So I think I joined probably about 5 to 6 different clubs just directly through Clubs Day, and then only ended up sticking with about 3 by the time I actually went to like the first meeting of all of them. So
Okay.
I think totally okay to like go to a first meeting and then leave. Like lots of people do that.
Yeah.
So it's always a good thing to try it out.
Yeah. And that kind of transitions perfectly into my next question is like, I know it's like a personal thing, but what would you say to people in terms of like how many clubs you should commit to, like so people aren't like burning out or splitting their time too heavily?
Yeah, definitely. It's I think you will learn pretty quickly how much you're able to take on just based on the course load that you have.
Yeah.
So for me, I took a reduced course load in my first term and then sort of brought it up to a full course load in my second term at UBC. So in my first term, I had a lot more like room and flexibility, just time in order to, go out and try out different clubs.
Yeah.
So I think that was really helpful because that allowed me to, I think, to try out 6 different ones, go to 6 different meetings. And then I ended up thinking that, okay, maybe only 3 is what I can handle right now with my course load. So that's what worked for me. And then by the time I got into second term, I actually brought that down to like just 2 clubs. So I think you really just have to like be adaptable with it. And if there's one that you're really passionate about, stick with that, right? Like just focus on the ones that you find yourself enjoying, and the ones that you think are going to make a difference down the road, or the ones where you have really good friends and connections like that. That's also really helpful. So I don't think there's a magic number for sure in terms of number of clubs, but that's what worked for me. And you really have to sort of assess based on your course load. And I think everyone learns really quickly that it's very different from like a high school course load. It's just sort of the amount of work that's expected between assignments is pretty high. So you're like constantly always reviewing and studying. So there is things to do every day, even when you think, you might have a free day. There is always like extra review and prep and stuff you can do. So yeah, definitely sort of see what works for you. A lot of people actually wait until they get their first assignments back to sort of see how much they want to commit to, because after you get your first assignments back, you'll sort of see how you're performing. And that's always a really good insight to say like, okay, maybe I actually do need to be like putting a little bit more time into my coursework.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And then I'm sure like a lot of people, especially like people keen on leadership positions, are always looking like, how do you get up higher in a club? Like, what is the process normally like to say become an executive member?
Yeah. So usually clubs will have to organize some sort of hiring application system. So usually in clubs that are affiliated with like a student association at a university, what happens is they have like a formalized election process for like their club president and I think the treasurer as well. And then there's other roles where they can sort of set their own rules as to how they want to fill those positions. So for most of the ones I've seen, it's been an application. And there's sort of two big application waves, I would say. One of them is between March and May, and that's sort of when clubs are hiring their executive team for the following year. And then if you're just looking to join a club, sort of like maybe in a mid-level position, if they have something in between executive and a general member, or just as a general member, then you're going to want to look usually between August and September. So that's always a good time to get involved. And I think I'll give you the sort of mini version of the story of how I got my executive position, which was through penny drops. And that was really just by staying connected with the executive as a general member. So throughout my year as a general member, I was, making suggestions and giving ideas and insights, and making sure that I fulfilled my job to the best of my ability within the club. And that was something that was really valuable to them and, showed at the end. And that's why I actually got tapped to help be one of the co-presidents, and then help hire the rest of the executive team as a result. So I moved pretty quickly, from general member to co-president. Yeah. So it was definitely a big jump, but I was able to make that jump because I sort of proved how much I cared about the organization, and always tried to assist wherever I could. And that reflects well, 100%. If you are a club executive at any point and you're looking to see who could potentially fill your shoes in the future, you're always looking at people who really show they care about the mission of the club and stuff like that, and show that they're good leaders. So try to demonstrate leadership skills even when you're not in a leadership role as well. And that can always help if you're trying to secure an executive position.
Okay, no, that's some really good insight. I know this is more a personal question, seeing that I was a big Model UN person and in high school. I mean, that's how we met I think 3 years ago or something. Does university Model UN look a lot different than high school Model UN, or?
Yeah, it is a little bit different. So at least compared to Vancouver high school style. Yeah. So I think there's a couple different styles of Model UN, Harvard style, New York style, all these different names. I just sort of know two different styles. So it was the opposite one from what is used in Vancouver high schools. So if you have been to conferences like Vancouver Model United Nations or Canadian high schools, Canada International, all the ones that are based in Metro Vancouver, it's a different style from those. And it's more procedural stuff, but you get the hang of it pretty quickly. I think people sort of overestimate, the caliber of some of the conversations that you're going to have at the university level. Yeah. Oftentimes it's actually not even at as high of a level as you will get in high school. So I personally was not a really big fan of being a delegate in university Model UN. But I ended up applying for a staff position at UBC Model United Nations. Ended up not actually being able to do it because of COVID. But I technically had a staff role and I was, preparing backgrounders and stuff like that. Yeah. And I found that even just through the preparation process was so much more engaging. So I wouldn't be afraid also if you've done Model UN in high school to apply directly for a staff position at the university level. They often hire people who have never been delegates at the university level, and you don't have to. So Model UN, I would say there's less hype around it in university than there is in high school, for sure. At least at UBC. Yeah.
I don't know what it's like in the rest of Canada, but Model UN's pretty big in Vancouver, I would say.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah. And then kind of into another topic here, more general about making friends and stuff. How did you find making friends, say, outside of class or clubs or even just residents? Was it easy to make friends, I guess, elsewhere, or?
I think definitely it was. at the beginning. So I think it gets progressively more difficult to make new friends like as the year goes on, because I think that's just sort of the climate that like everybody's in, right? Like at the beginning of the year, everybody like is trying to meet people, and nobody like sort of has established friend groups most of the time. So it makes it really easy in that way, because when you like strike up a conversation with somebody, it's much more likely that that's going to like turn into a long-term friendship than like if you were to do that later on during the year. So I think like different ways you can do that, like outside of clubs and residence, like your classes are one way to do it. But I would say probably not in big lectures. Like most of your classes in first year are going to have like a lecture and a discussion session. So like use your discussion session in this case, right? Like talk to people who are in that like one group. And it's usually a smaller group of people. Like you're expected to have conversations in the class anyway. So that's always like helpful, and something that you can use to meet people. But I think like it's funny because most of the friends that I've made at university, I've literally just met in passing, and then it turned into a friendship. So it's not like we met through like a very formalized event type of situation, or just like met each other in class. Like I think I met people during the week of Jumpstart, which was our orientation week, a lot, just because everybody who was on campus was most likely a first year. So definitely like engaging with people at that point in time is your best bet at making good friendships that last, I think. But that's my experience, right? And I think everybody's going to have their own experience. And I know different people who go to UBC and other universities around the country where they're actually able to make really good friendships through their classes and through residence and through different events that take place throughout the year. And for them, it wasn't like orientation week. So I think it varies for everybody. So I wouldn't say my answer is sort of like the end all be all or anything. It's just my experience and what worked for me.
Yeah, that's so true. I think it's just everyone has a different experience, and you have to take that into account. Totally. And I guess like nowadays, I'm sure you've seen like all like the 2025, 2024, like those Instagram pages before you come. Do you find like meeting people on like social media and stuff a good way, or is it like, I don't know, do you have any experience like prior to you going to UBC?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't participate in it when there was like the UBC like 2023 is what it was for me. I didn't participate in that, like, or give them my information and be like, hey, like post about me on social media. So I sort of left it up to chance in that sense. Like I didn't really engage in that way. Like I was following the page and all just so I could like see what was going on and like see some of the different people who were there, like maybe to see if I knew anybody. But I mean, social media didn't play a big role for me, and I was just fine. So I think a lot of it is making those in-person connections, especially now that people who are starting their university year are going to be starting on campus, hopefully in September. I think definitely like social media is going to play less of a role than it did like in 2020 for people starting. So it's not to say that you can't make connections that way. People have. Just like for me, I'm like intimidated by that. I'm just like, oh, I don't know if I'm just gonna like reach out to somebody who I see like on social media, like maybe like same major or something like that.
Yeah.
But people often make group chats, which I would say is like the one big exception to this. Is like people will be like, hey, let's create a group chat for like everybody who's in international relations or everybody who's living in this residence area. Those are actually helpful, I would say. Like those can actually get you to like interact with like a smaller group of people. And that was more comfortable for me. And then I was more comfortable like talking to them and like actually building friendships that way. So I think that was sort of like the one exception. I don't think the big social media accounts actually do that much for you, but those smaller group chats that can branch off from there can be helpful. Yeah.
No, that's so true. I feel like I'm in the same boat there where I see like the big pages and stuff, and it's like, do I submit photos and stuff? Do I want to just like have random people messaging me and stuff? But I feel like group chats are probably the way to go there.
Totally. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that was my last question. So yeah, thanks, Samir, for taking the time to chat. I think that was a really insightful conversation. I know I definitely learned a lot, and I'm sure everyone listening probably did too.
Awesome. Thanks, Noah. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I hope for the same thing, that everyone learned a lot, and wishing everyone who's starting in in September. Best of luck.
Thanks for listening to the second episode of Season 2 of Post-Secondary Tea, presented by Leap Canada. Make sure to subscribe to be notified whenever we release a new episode, and follow us on social media at leap.canada to get updates on all our exciting events and projects.